Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Star Trek versus the Transformers. Last time this happened. Usually I elaborate more, but when you're crossing over an 80s toy line of such iconography with the animated incarnation of a sci-fi mainstay, this speaks volumes compared to what I could sum up.
Issue 4's cover would make for an amazing poster. Fort Tiberius in ship mode with Optimus Prime in the background opening up the Matrix.
I've got your Prime Directive right here!
If this had been done in the 90s, you know they would have added some hollow foil for a shiny, shimmering effect. Fort Tiberius is brawling with Trypticon, boasting about now possessing the power of a Federation starship. Inside, Ratchet reminds Kirk that he's commanding the reformatted Fortress Maximus's body, but the Titan's thirst for retribution could overwhelm him. His fisticuffs is even less well received by the people they rescued last issue, and Spock warns they're forbidden by Starfleet orders to terminate intelligent life. Kirk thinks he can make an exception because his foe resembles a long-extinct dinosaur of Earth.
If nothing else, his court-martial should be entertaining to watch. Why, yes, I did kill that giant intelligent creature, but it looked like a dinosaur, so it's okay. And that pre-warp civilization that I influenced to think of me as a wizard? Well, what does civilization mean when you think about it anyway?
As Commander Kuri alludes to a possible deal that he made with Starscream that the Seeker would prefer stay clandestine, Megatron is already miffed about the presence of a Titan, wondering where his lead attack plane is, since he's no longer beside the Klingon commander. Screamer reappears literally in the dilithium mines, intent on using it for his own dreams of conquest. Topside, Jazz is content letting the Klingons deal with the consequences of making a pact with the Decepticons, but Maress says that the Federation makes a point to protect all life whenever possible, even if it involves their enemies. When Trypticon almost crushes them without noticing, Sulu asks Jazz to consider comparing his anger about humans to how they might feel about him.
Let's set aside the fact that somehow the whole planet forgot that they were home to giant alien robots for a while, thus being their real first contact in this continuity. The story so far has featured flashbacks indicating that humans went to war independent of Cybertronian influence, and the Autobots left of their own accord to find Energon. I'm not saying Jazz couldn't be mad at mankind, but I am saying the story is awfully vague about the why.
When Starscream makes an exit with some dilithium and disappears in the process, it doesn't take long for Megatron to realize Kuri gave him a cloaking device. The commander insists that, as allies, it was a matter of honor, but Megs opens fire on the Klingons, since he don't care about no stinking honor. Except victory by any means. It's distraction enough for Optimus to get in an energy axe attack and a poignant one-liner, even though he's still wounded. The Titan clash nearby also gets heated, in more ways than one. Fort Max is still sore about being stuck in stasis for so long because of Tripty, and takes a fire blast so intense Kirk himself can feel it.
The tingling means it's working. Too well. His brain's about to explode. I hope you put down a tarp.
I do like the visual of Kirk's expression here. It's like you can feel the Shatner. Bad news is the line between Kirk and Fort Max is getting blurry, leaving the former in particular danger as Ratchet encourages him to remember who he is.
Never forget who you are.
Don't make the same mistake I did.
And these panels I find just a little weird. We have these extreme close-ups of Megs and Optimus, but it's difficult to tell what's really up with Prime's half. The chain of Megatron's mace is just up against his faceplate. I'm betting it's supposed to be wrapped around the neck of Prime's axe, but if so, they accidentally colored both weapons the same. Anyway, Megs takes time to threaten Kuri, a decent enough excuse to write in the old Klingon standards, "Today is a good day to die."
But it is not a good day to die hard. Giant Pictures and TSG Entertainment bring dishonor to their houses and Bruce Willis.
Jazz knocks Megatron aside as the rest of the Autobots rally behind their leader, who is suddenly very far away. He was right in front of Megs a second ago. Did he jump into the far background for some reason? I just don't know what's going on. This is the Trek universe, so maybe it was a temporary localized wormhole or something. Meanwhile, Kirk is refocusing himself, that he's the captain of the Enterprise. And I came here to protect life.
Unless it resembles an extinct giant lizard from my home planet!
Megs tells Trypticon they're going to prioritize destroying Starscream, promising to do away with the fleshling soon enough as he transports onto the Mecha Dino after it's turned into a Klingon ship once again. Usually in Transformer alt modes, there's some kind of logic involved. You can see how Jazz can transform into a sports car and how Prime can transform into a semi-truck because those elements remain in their robot forms. Portions of their vehicle mode become part of their exterior. Sometimes it's functional, sometimes it's purely aesthetic. But you can look at both modes and see how one can change into the other. Trypticon, however, is changing from one thing to an entirely different thing, different mass and different proportions, and it just seems very weird.
Whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it.
Moving on, Jim is getting his noggin back in order, his survival of the convergence lauded by Optimus Prime, as Spock beams down to arrest Kuri and his crew. Of course, they'd rather die than experience Federation custody, but they got bigger problems. For Kirkamus detected Starscream headed for Klingon space, with the other Khans on his trail. Jazz doesn't much care about a baddie conquering a planet full of other baddies, but Spock counters that even on a world where their inhabitants call home, innocents are still innocents and worthy of protection from destructive hostile forces. Saying this while apparently being drawn off model from an old Spock action figure.
I should be holding a phaser in this hand, but I seem to have dropped it. Could someone with more than 5 points of articulation please pick it up for me?
As for the real Enterprise, it's stuck in the proverbial water with no response to their distress calls, and no idea if their crew is still alive. But Lieutenant Uhura picks up a surprise transmission from the other Enterprise. Kirk assures her that everything is fine, even if it is a long story, which for once doesn't involve temporal anomalies or evil mirror universes. Along with the away team, the Autobots are beamed aboard the flagship, though in the hangar bay for obvious reasons. Welcoming any help Optimus and his people can give, Jim needs his ship back up to speed so they can stop the Decepticons, though it entails entering Klingon space, which could be viewed as an act of war.
Yeah, but you're Klingons. You're so used to looking for a fight, you'll take anything as an act of war. You trespassed into our space. You stepped on my toes. Little known fact, one of the bloodiest battles ever waged on the planet was because one Klingon told his buddy that those brownies he made were a little on the dry side.
Meanwhile, on board the Trypticon of Prey, Megatron admits he could find dilithium elsewhere, but Starscream's insurrection could lead to other cons rising up as well, and it's time to put an end to Screamer's ambitions once and for all, which is probably the 100th time Megs has said that in any given continuity. The issue concludes with the traitor in question arriving on Kronos.
Just what I've always wanted. My very own planet.
Kinda tacky to give yourself a present, isn't it? Well, this is the Trek universe, so maybe he's just following Ferengi rule of acquisition number 45. Expand or die. Oddly enough, it's also rule number 95. Either Trek's canon goofed or they just decided it was doubly important.
The final cover is a big battle scene, Autobots against Decepticons with the Titan and the Enterprise in the background. It's pretty cool and a nice touch for the final issue. Kirk is again hooked up to Fort Max, assuring he's clear-headed as he prepares to head into Klingon territory, though there's still the matter of the crippled Enterprise. Scotty says the ship won't take much more damage, and doesn't like the idea of risking it and the crew for the Klingons. This seems to activate Optimus's melodrama subroutine, as he laments drawing others into Cybertronian conflicts. He's duty-bound to protect the Klingons, despite the Federation's prime directive. Whether by action or inaction, regardless of affiliation with his own allies, Optimus points at the reader and declares he won't let any Cybertronian cause harm to other civilizations. Consider this Prime's directive.
Kinda makes me wonder just how long he's been holding on to that one, just waiting for the right moment to use it in an inspirational speech. Look at his stance, it's just screaming, "Knowing is half the battle." He clearly thought this through.
On Kronos, the High Council is considering retaliation against the Federation. That's when they get a party crasher in the form of Starscream, who took the time to learn their language, apparently digging the guttural aggressiveness of it, and makes himself a throne out of rubble, establishing himself as Emperor Starscream I. If he needed to be rebooted, would he then go by Starscream II? Anyway, the two Enterprises are on their way to Kronos at maximum warp, and after he and Prime wax experiential about the burdens of leadership, and the Big Bot's statement about wishing he had more than one life to risk, Jim is struck by inspiration, asking Scotty how much inorganic material can be replicated in the 6 hours it'll take to get to Kronos. That's where we go, where the High Council is laughing at Screamer's proposition, saying their people would rather choose honorable death over life under his mechanical foot. They get a laser blast in return, with the Seeker boasting about the previous High Councils he's crushed, and the Klingons likely have a breaking point, as any government does.
If leaders really wanted to die with honor, they'd be on the battlefield.
And cue an attack on the city, with Starscream expecting his subjects to go out and fight the battle of their lives. It only gets funnier from there, as the Klingons in the room open fire on him, and then the robot looks to find it's not the Autobots attacking, it's Megatron and the rest of the Decepticons.
Ah, classic Starscream. When it comes to conquest and power, his optics are bigger than his stomach, meaning he's always good for a laugh when his plans fall apart.
This is a really cool shot of them all descending on the Capitol building, though the background has something of a stylized cosmic look to it. They're obviously not in space, since they attack Screamer immediately, but it also doesn't look like the interior of a dwelling or a ship, so I guess just call it artistic liberty. Meg smacks his lackey around, seeming to only threaten him with his trademark arm cannon, before ordering the destruction of the planet for its restructuring as New Kaon, the foundation of a new Decepticon empire that will first target the Human Federation. But before Soundwave's cassettes can enact Operation Klingon Crowd Control, they're challenged on 2 whole pages by Fort Tiberius, the Autobots, and some new robots charging into battle, ones looking strikingly like certain Starfleet officers. Optimus insists that a planet belongs to all its inhabitants, not one being, but of course Megs has the counter.
These Klingons respect my power. They will do my bidding with pleasure.
Dude, they just met you. I don't think they know you from Starscream other than you kicked his exhaust port. I don't see them changing their stance about death before servitude. And I thought the Seeker was presumptuous.
In response, Kirk releases Curry and his crew. The Klingon officially dissolves the truce, is handed a bat'leth, I guess was just lying around in the rubble, and says that Megatron will never see victory so long as one Klingon heart beats. So the giant gunbot orders his minions to wipe them all out.
Technically, it's Curry's idea. Megatron's just rolling with it. As well as a Walther P-38 can roll. I mean, it's awkwardly shaped, but if you threw it just right and it was downhill... You know what? I'm thinking too much about that.
Thus, the biggest robo-rumble thus far begins in earnest. And sure enough, the Enterprise crew are piloting the robots bearing their likenesses.
First G.I. Joe, now Starfleet. The Autobots are just handing out personalized mech suits. What's next? Will Batman get one if he meets the Transformers? Or the Ninja Turtles? Or the Power Rangers? Wait a minute.
Fortunately, these mechs are durable enough to withstand acid storms, well, acid. Good thing, or else that'd be kinda lame getting knocked out of the fight within 5 seconds like that. Way to go, Federation replicators. Megatron battles Prime, naturally, claiming superior Decepticon numbers and general strength has already won their battle. Sulu reveals a blade built into his mech to remind people he fences, and RC helps deal with some RoboCat on RoboCat violence.
Giant robot cat lady. Does this make Maress the first Maximal? Someone get Optimus Primal on the horn?
Having had enough, Megatron orders Soundwave to unleash a sonic attack, disabling their foes, then plans to waste Prime before conquering Earth. Curry approaches, not to seek mercy, but to inform the Decepticon that his sonics have no effect on Klingons, because I guess Klingon ears are just so significantly different somehow, and that he took some advice from Captain Kirk, having several bird of prey vessels modify their weapons to be extra effective on Cybertronians.
Surprisingly, we never thought to turn the dial from enemy spaceship to giant robot before now. Frankly, I thought it was put there as a gag, but hey, live and learn.
It's from there that the pacing really ramps up. Within one page, the Khans are shot and apparently defeated, learning, as Kuri put it,
That there's more to us than meets the eye.
kind of a clunky way to incorporate the slogan that was already used earlier, but there you have it. Afterwards, Kirk is adding to his captain's log that in the midst of a tenuous truce between the Federation and the Klingons, the latter take custody of the Decepticons. Jim didn't really like the idea, since there was still potential for further conflict, but for some unnamed reason there really weren't any other options. I suppose one possibility is that since they attacked Kronos and were largely beaten by the Klingon weaponry, they had dibs. Also, no mention if Starscream survived or not. As for the Autobots, their destiny lies elsewhere, so decline the offer to follow the Enterprise back to Earth. But they left the Fleshlings a hailing frequency should they need any help in the future. And so concludes this story, two Enterprises parting ways, and Kirk giving their new allies a special send-off. Live long, Autobots. And roll out.
And that was Star Trek versus the Transformers. I certainly enjoyed myself, and it's plenty of fun, but is it possible for a story to feel too long and too short at the same time?
I don't know if I can articulate it well enough. Pacing seems fine for the most part, but it seems they spend a lot of time doing very little, then kind of speed up in other areas. Many of the panels are mostly characters talking, with the background taking up most of the space. There is action, of course, and I wouldn't call it bad by any stretch of the imagination, though I would have liked to have seen more of the Klingons fighting the cassettes with their handheld weapons, but I can't shake the weird contradictory feeling of how long it feels vis-a-vis how long it maybe should have been. However, the art is great, flawlessly integrating the 80s robots with the limited motion cartoon designs of the original Trek cast. There are some panels shaped like faction crests, which I thought was a nice touch. I also noticed a subtle shading outline for most of the characters, which I think has to be a nod to a similar effect you sometimes see in cell animation.
Though there's not a whole lot I can say from personal experience, as I've only ever seen one episode of the Trek cartoon. Some love potion shenanigans, as I recall. Still, it's a nice detail that I can at least respect on an artistic level.
Though one definite criticism is how rigid the Trek characters look, especially compared to the robots they're co-starring with. And the story had a few things that had me raising my eyebrows as well, like the effectiveness of phasers on Cybertronians. Prime is disabled for much of the story because of one hit, but the Khans just shrug them off.
Wizard.
For claving out.
Though I did enjoy Bones ordering him around like he would any other patient. It shows that, yeah, he's a mechanical being, but he's still a life form and the doc is committed to taking care of him. That's a nice human touch that acts in contrast to his usual curmudgeonly self. Not unlike how he'd argue with Spock, but still considered him a close friend. You could say that the difference in phaser effectiveness had something to do with why the Decepticons were so much stronger and faster, but that never got explained. Nor did the real reason why Jazz had such a hate-on for humans. It seemed like he was lightening up here and there, but it was pretty inconsistent since he went back to being grumpy or spiteful at the drop of a robot hat, and it never really went anywhere. The last we read of it is Sulu suggesting he look at things from a fleshy perspective, and nothing else. Some stuff I could write off as just trying to emulate the logic or pacing of the cartoons, like how Fortress Maximus, I guess, somehow gets a power boost just by reformatting to the Enterprise specs. But am I the only one that thinks it would have made more sense for those schematics to be downloaded from Scotty's brain? You want Jim in the headset controlling things, okay, I get that. But for the nuts and bolts, I feel like the engineer makes more sense. But hey, Kirk's the main character.
Even if you're more of a fan of the post-TOS series, such as myself, I think you'll still get a kick out of this read, cheesy dialogue notwithstanding. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.